When I got back to the game, I was getting very upset and confused. I thought about the way the monster looked at me. The game couldn't have heard what I said. That's impossible. It had to be a random occurrence. But why did it happen precisely at the moment I insulted the monster? Nothing about this game made any sense. The new Godzilla monsters, the weird replacement monsters, out-of-place imagery like the quiz levels, red monster chases, and the green temple. It didn't seem to add up in any kind of meaningful way. If it was a prank, it wasn't funny in any way I could understand, and they clearly put far too much effort into it. If they were trying to make a genuine sequel with new monsters, then why did they add everything else? Maybe it was some kind of art experiment, some group project made by a bunch of really talented and crazy people, but they lost the cartridge somehow, or maybe they intended for someone to find it. It was all just fruitless guessing as far as I could tell. There was only one way that I could figure out what the deal was with this game. To play it through to the end. Maybe, just maybe, there would be something in the credits, an explanation by the creators as to why they made this, or it could be something much more cryptic and strange. Maybe even something horrifying. Before I got a good look at the Dementia board, I considered replaying Trance to see if the red monster would look at me again, but I decided against it. I wanted to keep moving forward. I was also somewhat worried about backtracking, it might cause the game to become more strange. The Dementia board music sounded a lot like the Saturn music, except it was slowed down and played with a piano-sounding instrument. Like most of the new map themes, it had a dangerous, suspenseful feel to it. While listening to the music, I looked at the board. There were 4 new boss monsters this time: Manda, Gigan, Space Godzilla, and Barragan. I was surprised that Manda and Space Godzilla were here. But the best surprise was still to come. I started the quiz level. Here's another list of the results in the same format as the last time. Can you swim? Answer yes, reaction happy. Question 2. Do you like fish? Answer yes, reaction sick. Question 3. Can penguins fly? Answer no, reaction sad. Question 4. Can it spin in all directions? There was no clarification of what face meant by it, so I just guessed. Answer no, reaction surprised. Question 5. Do you breathe the oxygen? Answer yes, reaction weird face 8. Question 6. Does it taste good when you bite a person? I don't know who came up with this question, but I really do hope they're getting mental help. Answer no, reaction annoyed. Question 7. Is it nighttime where you are? Answer yes, reaction weird face 6. Question 8. Do you like cats? Answer yes, reaction confused. Question 9. Is the water wet? Answer yes, reaction angry. Question 10. Have you ever broken a bone? Answer no, reaction happy. Question 11. Do you like your job? Answer yes, reaction hurt. Question 12. Would you like a new monster? I wasn't entirely sure what face meant by new monster, but I couldn't resist answering yes. So to see what happened, I just said yes. The result was mind-blowing. The game took me back to the board and I had a new playable monster in the form of Anguirus. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to play as Anguirus, since he was my second favourite Godzilla monster. And plus, I never really liked Mothra that much. I moved my Anguirus piece over to the level next to it, eager to test out my new monster. Before I get into the level description, I'll talk about Anguirus for a bit. Using the up and down buttons, you could choose whether Anguirus stood in a bipedal stance or crawled on all fours. It wasn't a huge difference, but being able to stand was helpful in boss fights, and crawling sometimes helped dodge obstacles and attacks. He could punch and kick like Godzilla, but no tail whip. Instead, he had something far more interesting, the ability to turn into a spiked ball of death and roll around. You could still take damage, but it was lessened. It was a good way of clearing out stage enemies, but unfortunately this also drained the power bar. But the spiked ball wasn't his only special ability. When you pressed start, he would fire a heat beam from his mouth, but resembled Titanosaurus's sonar attack, and if this was a hack, maybe it was inspired by the roar from Atari's Godzilla fighting games. Also of note is when I was playing as Anguirus, the level meter gets glitched up. Judging by the life and power bar, I would say he's on level 10. Now on to the level. As you might have guessed from the level icon, these levels are green palette swaps of the ground and background tiles from the Blue Mountains. What immediately caught my attention was the water, which had a transparency effect. Was it even possible for an NES to do that? I know the Super Nintendo could do it, but I'd never seen it on the NES in any game. The Green Mountains music was played with the same instruments as the Blue Mountains, but the melody was totally different. It was a very simple song with a lot of abrupt pauses, followed by a loud note every few seconds. Anyway, I went through the usual strolling of the level. Again, there were no monsters or anything, but pretty soon I had reached a cliff above the water. There was nowhere else to go but in the water, so down I went. The water transparency made things a bit harder to see, but it's tolerable. After going underwater, I encountered two new enemies, a giant piranha of some kind, and a spiky bottom feeder thing. I liked the piranha because you could easily tell what they were. It was a sane enemy design that would appear in a real game, and there were very few enemies like this. They didn't take that many hits to kill, but they were quite annoying, and could considerably trim down your life if they got close enough. They also tend to travel in packs. As for the bottom feeder things, they're easy to deal with. They swim along the bottom of the screen towards you, and are easily crushed with the roll attack or jumped over. In the screen cap you can see me about to run one of them over, and a pack of piranha behind it. I beat that level and moved Godzilla onto the blue castle icon. I started the level and got a title screen with the text, "Unforgiving Cold." The level itself looked like a castle dungeon made of blue bricks, with rows of identical white statue faces on the walls. These statue faces had a permanent look of horror on their face. There was also some flickering grey static, which didn't really obscure my vision, but adds to the very unsettling mood of these levels. The music had a 12-second loop, and a low-pitched choir vocalizing that sounded very familiar to me. Whenever I played through one of these levels, I got this sudden, horrible feeling of anxiety. I had the feeling that the farther I progressed, the closer I was getting to some unspeakable evil. There weren't any enemies, but these were some of the longest levels in the game. I only played one, but it took 7 minutes to complete. I didn't want to admit to myself at the time, but I realized something about the Blue Castle level. The game has the power to make the player feel certain things. I don't mean in the same sense you get irritated by a crappy game, or unnerved by something scary in a horror game. What I mean is that certain events in the game can instantly make you start feeling something. I know that sounds completely insane. I don't blame you for not believing me. I wouldn't believe any of this either if I didn't play the game myself. But there is something very, very wrong with this game, and I still don't know how to explain it. Then, it was time to fight Barragan's replacement. Although Barragan was originally the smallest monster in the game, his replacement was the largest. It was so tall, in fact, that the ground was noticeably lowered, and not Barragan's head still barely avoided collision with the bar at the top of the screen. He was just as frighteningly bizarre as he was huge. You might be wondering, How does he attack without arms? Well, he has the most powerful kick in the game, but his other fighting technique is much stranger. He first blasts a cloudy breath of pixels down at you, which causes you to freeze. Then he walks back to the right corner of the screen and extends a Gatling gun from his abdomen. That may seem amusing to you, but it certainly wasn't to me when I was playing the game. This attack is almost as annoying as Gigan's saw, and not Barragan could have been unbeatable if he consistently used it. Thankfully, he only did it twice while fighting him. Once you unfreeze, you can run up and start damaging the gun, which does extra damage to him. This helped me to destroy him, and then it was time to play the third level type. I decided I was going to use Anguirus to fight Manda and Gigan, and I was gonna fight Space Godzilla as Godzilla. It was only fitting. Before getting into the battles, I'll describe the third level type, the Arctic. The Arctic is what you'd guess from the name, an icy tundra with few watery segments. The music reminded me a bit of Northern Hemispheres from Donkey Kong Country in 8-bit form, a very dangerous sounding song. It made me think about being trapped in a tundra and freezing to death. There were two enemies in this stage. The first was a creature frozen in a block of ice. They block your way and you have to use the heat beam to thaw them out of the ice. They look like a smaller version of not Godzilla, only without the eye. When freed, they do a strange crawling movement and push you backwards. It doesn't cause any damage, but it's a bit annoying. After dealing with the Iceman, I kept walking for a minute too, until I came upon a watery segment. I jumped in, and this time I managed to get a screen cap showing the water splashes when you jump in. Don't know how they programmed that, but it's pretty impressive. Another interesting thing is how the screen changes focus when you go underwater. Here you can see the other new enemy, a little thing I call the Spike Walker. They walk towards you and explode randomly, or instantly if you attack them, sending spikes in every direction. The spikes don't do much damage, but they did me dangerously close to falling into a pit a few times. Oh, speaking of the pits, down in the water, the game has a platformer element, bottomless pits. There weren't any of these in the original game, since it was strictly an action game, but the pits were a neat addition. After getting back on land, I encountered a very unexpected mini-boss, Maguma, the Walrus Kaiju. I know this game has some obscure monsters to begin with, but wow. Not that I'm complaining, it's a pretty cool cameo for an underappreciated kaiju. Maguma's fighting tactics were very simple. He had a freeze beam, and he could charge into you. Not very challenging, but certainly more entertaining than the Matango mini-boss of the original game. Oh, one really interesting thing about Maguma is that he doesn't die when you defeat him. He just turns tail and runs. This was the first time I'd ever seen a boss monster change direction, let alone retreat. I tried to chase after him, but then he disappeared after I got into the water. Barragan. That does it for the Arctic. I'll talk about the Manda fight next, but there's something I forgot to mention. The music played during the new monster fights is reused from the actual game. So far the themes have been Titanosaurus used Gezora's music, Biolante used Hedora's music, Orga Barragan/Mogera's music, Manda used Varan's music, and Space Godzilla used Mechagodzilla's music. As for the fight, Manda was a fairly crafty opponent. When he realized one tactic wasn't effective, he immediately changed to a different one. Manda used quite a few tricks, like spitting fire, biting, and the most irritating of all, constricting. It doesn't mercilessly drain your life down like Gigan's cutter, but it was by far Manda's strongest attack. One last thing to note that I found pretty cool was that the Gotengo from Atragon showed up during the fight against Manda to help me out. Manda crushed it with ease, but it was still cool. After I slayed Manda, I played through an Arctic level for health power-ups, and then it was on to Gigan's replacement. When the fight started, I was very confused, because there was nothing there. I thought this was going to be like the Titanosaurus fight in Pathos. But just about the time it would have been to go back to the map, a piranha appeared on screen. But it wasn't there for long. Because as soon as it appeared, the speakers emitted an ear-splitting screech, and Not Gigan appeared and ripped the fish into pieces. Well, that was one way to get the player on their toes. The abrupt entrance scared the hell out of me and got my adrenaline rushing, which in retrospect was a good thing, because Not Gigan was one of the fastest, most unrelenting opponents in the game. Not Gigan was tough, but my new skills with Anguirus helped me even the score. This was still an incredibly intense fight. Not Gigan's attacks consist of some kind of blood laser he spews from his mouth, and a downward slash. I was expecting some kind of hellish variant of the buzzsaw attack, but thankfully there didn't seem to be one. The howl attack was invaluable in defeating him. It would have taken more screen caps of the fight, but I really had to concentrate. After that, there was one more monster to take down, Space Godzilla. As I mentioned earlier, I used Godzilla for this fight. Space Godzilla's fighting technique was rather frustrating, but admittedly a very clever idea. Space Godzilla would use his energy to create two flying crystals, which would reach the ground and become crystal spires. These spires not only block you from reaching him, but also allowed him to constantly recharge to full energy, and blast you with the fully charged deadly Corona Beam until you broke the spires. Space Godzilla would eventually drain his own spires of their energy until they shattered, but if you waited for that to happen, you'd probably lose a lot of life. Heat beams actually seemed to re-energize the spires, so you had to use physical attacks. When you finally got close enough to hit Space Godzilla, he was no pushover. When I punched him, he hit me back just as hard. Space Godzilla does everything in his power to knock you back to the left corner of the screen so he can create more spires. By the time this was over, I only had about 5 health bars left. But it didn't matter, because I didn't need to fight anymore. I needed to run. Here we go again. I decided then that I really wanted to see the end of this game, as terrifying as these levels could be. I had to beat them to get through. I decided no matter what happened, no matter what the game showed me, I was gonna get to the end. And I also made sure not to say a damn word when playing a chase level from here on in. For this chase I tried out Anguirus, since his roll attack allowed me to move faster than Godzilla or Mothra. The chase started off like the first two, except there was a river of blood below the ground. I was beginning to get the hang of it, and the extra speed from the roll helped me get an edge on the monster. Especially since I didn't have to worry about a power limit, I could keep rolling endlessly. Like the previous levels with water, the ground inevitably reached a stop, so I rolled off into the blood. To my surprise, the hellbeast didn't follow after me. It just stopped at the edge of the ground and grimaced. Guess it can't swim, I thought to myself. So I went under blood and continued moving. There wasn't anything around, but I knew something was up. The chase wasn't going to end that easily, could it? Surely something else had to show up, and sure enough, I heard the bellowing roar, sounding slightly different. And the monster appeared in a new aquatic body and began following after me. I had no idea it was a shapeshifter. After it reappeared, the chase started to get into the difficulty I expected. Being submerged slowed me down, putting me in the beast at the same speed. The only thing that would keep me alive was fast thinking and reflexes. I encountered some bottomless pits, which mines floated up from. I assumed that if you hit one, it would damage you and knock you back. Considering how fast the red monster swims, hitting the mines would be instant death. So I went through great effort not to hit them. But that wasn't the only thing I had to be wary of. Halfway through the chase, The hell beast revealed yet another surprise. A tentacle formed of intestine and tipped with a clawed set of jaws burst from its mouth, trying to pull me in and devour me. I only barely avoided both the tentacle and the mines, but I could tell the beast was getting desperate, because the chase was nearly over. And about a minute later, I'd spotted a big bit of ground that served as the exit. I leaped with all the might I could muster without breaking my controller. The beast screamed with rage and jumped out of the blood river in one last attempt to drag me down, but I escaped its grasp this time. I fell back onto my bed and took a deep breath, satisfied with yet another successful escape. Now I was headed to the fifth world. Entropy.